Good evening, AWS friends. It's good to see all of you, currently 22 of you. Welcome to the May 2022 AWS User Group UK meetup, online as we have been for the last couple of years for obvious reasons that we don't need to go into. Yeah, thanks for joining. I know there is a schedule conflict tonight. The Manchester User Group are actually running an in-person meetup group right now, and I was in Manchester this afternoon, actually up until about lunchtime, and I definitely would have gone to that if I didn't have to come here and run the online one. Speaking of locations, why don't you tell us whereabouts in the world you are? Let's see who is our furthest afield individual. We've had people from all over the world actually in previous events, so good to see where you're all from. BSA program first time chatter is in London. Welcome. And that's I was going to say that's not far away. I moved from London to Leeds in the last 3 months, and so to me, I still feel like I'm in London when I'm doing this, but I'm not. More Londoners. Is anybody not from London? Or do we have anybody who's either in the north of England, other than me, or perhaps outside of the UK entirely? Bournemouth. I can guess which Andrew that is. Manchester. Well done, United Shady, and a South Wales and a Norfolk. Livingston, marvellous. We have a range of people. We can in fact own the name AWS User Group UK because we do have people from User Group UK. United Shady says, no idea there was an in-person meetup tonight. Yeah, sorry, you could probably be actually having cold pizza and warm beer in an actual place this evening had you seen that. But yes, they're back in person, as I understand it. I may have that entirely wrong. Good to see you. Let's have a quick talk about what's happened since we were last here on the stream. I guess in the last 2 months, there's been an AWS summit in London. I don't know if any of you who are on the chat were at the summit. Do let me know if you were. I was there with some of my team. We had a pretty good week of chatting to customers and taking various people out for dinner. There was a lot of dinners involved that week, which is usually fine, but I usually enjoy going out for dinner. But when they're sort of back to back, multiple days, can get a bit much. But since then, I've made a short list of the things that we found that were kind of interesting from the launches that have been mentioned on the What's New RSS feed from AWS in the last couple of months. These are things that either caught the attention of my team or caught my attention. In particular, our favourite one, I know Andrew, who's on the chat there, is a big fan of this. There's now a programmatic way of closing Amazon accounts using AWS organizations. So if you're an organizations user and you've got multiple AWS accounts, you might be familiar with the challenges of setting up and tearing down accounts. The latter was not actually possible in any kind of automated way. There is now an API for doing that, which is very exciting. There we go. Yay from Andrew in the chat. Good job. Other things that are kind of interesting, AWS Chatbot now supports management of AWS resources from Slack. So you can run AWS CLI commands and system manager automation runbooks from Slack if you want to do that, which is kind of cool if you've got a team of people who are administering AWS and you want them to be able to run things occasionally and maybe chat about the things that they're running and see the results of them in one place. AWS Chatbot is worth looking at and do that. Another thing that stuck out to me is particularly interesting. Aurora Postgres now supports foreign data wrappers for Microsoft SQL Server and Sybase databases. So if you are collecting data, or if you want to query data from your Sybase and SQL Server databases using the Aurora Postgres interface, you can now do that without actually having to slurp all that data into Postgres with an ETL job. So quite a time saver, and if you're using that sort of heterogeneous setup for databases, that might be of interest to you or your DBAs. We're at 36 people on the feed now. Good to see a few more faces show up. Do let us know where you are. Let's see if we've got anybody from outside of the UK. I don't think we've seen that yet. So do say hello. We also, in the last couple of months, Amazon RDS now supports itemized billing for storage, IOPS, and backup features. So you can break down what RDS is costing you slightly more granularly, which is all very useful stuff. And the sustainability pillar is now available in the AWS well-architected tool. There's been a lot of talk of sustainability at AWS. There's a new well-architected pillar around it, giving some good recommendations around how to make your workloads a little greener. And the pillar now is in the well-architected tool, whereas it was previously just a list of questions in a PDF, which was a bit less straightforward. So if you are at all interested in sustainability in your organization, probably go over to the well-architected tool and have a poke at that. If you haven't looked at the well-architected tool, that's a really great way of assessing your workload and seeing whether or not you're following AWS best practices. So worth a look there. Other thing that stuck out to me is kind of interesting, general availability of Nitro TPM and UEFI secure boot on EC2. So if you're one of these shops that has a really kind of hardcore security requirement where you need a trusted platform module to attest that your software has not been tampered with, you can now do that from EC2 easily using Nitro TPM, and you can also use secure boot to verify that all the things in your boot chain have not been tampered with by checking signatures and such, and if they have, you can give up booting and flag that for your security team to have a poke at. All interesting stuff. On the continued security kind of theme, AWS is now not showing AMIs that are older than 2 years to public users. So we a number of years ago were publishing AMIs that were kind of based on CentOS and had things that were useful to us in there. We published them publicly because our customers were using them. We've got a lot of those floating around, so it's quite nice to hear that AWS are actively preventing people from using sort of 5 and 6 year old AMIs that we probably should have got around to deleting in all fairness, but Amazon are helping us with that now. A few serverless things which may well be of interest to Mark, who's one of our speakers this evening, currently lurking in the green room, nervous, even though he's already done his presentation because it's in a video I'm going to play back. But I'm going to ask you about this later, Mark, so pay attention. AWS Lambda console now supports the option to share test events between developers, so that's going to make life a bit easier for developers who are all working on the same Lambda functions. Nice and easy for you, and you can also now configure up to 10 gigabytes of ephemeral storage for Lambda functions, which is a 20 times increase on what was previously possible. So you can now process or generate much bigger data sets from your Lambdas, which is kind of handy. And I guess the big announcement over the last couple of months for a lot of people is the release or the general availability of Amazon Aurora Serverless v2, which is a database technology. Aurora Serverless allows you to essentially only pay for the database when you're using it, and V2 has solved a lot of cold start problems. So the databases can now stand up and tear down a little quicker than they used to. We work a lot with SaaS businesses, and Aurora Serverless is kind of interesting from a SaaS perspective, because if you've got a lot of customers, a lot of SaaS tenants, you can maybe give each of them an Aurora Serverless database to themselves, and then you can attribute the cost of that database directly to the tenant because they're using the resources, and you're billing directly what they're using, so and not paying for it when they're not using it. So all pretty interesting stuff. That's more or less what's been going on since we were last here. We're now at 43 people. Good to see you all. Those of you who've joined recently, why don't you say hello in the chat, tell us where you're from. I don't know if we've got anybody yet outside of the UK, at least no one as yet has confessed to not being in the UK. We've got quite a lot of London represented. We've got some Manchester there. We've got a bit of Livingston, Bournemouth, East London or Essex, depending on your point of view. Is that actually a subjective thing, or is that more of a postcode thing? Who's that? D. Bauer 2001. Another Londoner. There we go. We're very well represented by Londoners here this evening. That's perfectly fine by me. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter. We are AWS User Group UK. Most of what we tweet there is about our upcoming events. So that might be, even in fact, how you heard about this evening. And you can find us on LinkedIn as well if you want to go and have a look there. We tend to post about the events on that platform as well. Other things that are going on, we've got a Discord. The Discord we set up about probably within the last year, I think, to sort of provide a venue in which people can chat in between the user groups. Doesn't get a huge amount of traffic, but if you'd like to pop on there, there are occasional kind of conversations that kick off. We have a channel where people are sharing things that they've written, or they there's people posting jobs and talking about certifications and so forth. So definitely worth checking that out if you are interested in being part of the community in between these meetup groups themselves. So moving on, Jabbersoft saying struggle to find the right Twitch name. Suggest everyone hosts to bump it up the recommended list. Host button. I don't even know what that means, Jabbersoft. I'm sorry. It's this is literally the only time I look at Twitch in any sense at all. But apparently there are some buttons we can press. Maybe Jabbersoft can explain that a bit better in the chat, so that we're a bit easier to find. But 43 people have found us so far, and that's good. Nice to see people. And if you are outside of the UK, do tell us where you're from. We'll see who's our furthest, most distant joiner today. Do remember to complete our survey. That's really weird. My laptop's not showing that, but my screen is. What on earth is going on? Okay, fine. Got my laptop over here driving what you can see on the slides, and I've pressed the button and the QR code is appearing on the screen. My laptop's still showing the last slide. I have no idea why. Anyway, please do complete the survey at the end of this evening so that you can tell us what's worked for you about tonight, what we can improve on. Your feedback does allow us to make this event as good as it can be. And we're going to hear from some sponsors now. We obviously, when we're doing this in a physical space, we were a little more reliant on sponsors because we have higher costs to manage. But whilst we're online, we also have people sponsoring us and supporting us. So as a first pass, let's hear from the good people at Deloitte.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the AWS User Group. My name's Nathan Hancox, and I'm a consultant within Deloitte's cloud engineering practice. I've been with Deloitte for around 3.5 years now, and I've taken on a variety of roles in that time, so working as a business analyst and then in release management, and now as a Scrum Master. But I also work as the AWS community lead for our AWS practice here at Deloitte. Over the last few years, we've seen cloud being used as an enabler for organizations who are responding to extreme challenges, and helping those organizations migrate and then transform on AWS is something that me and my cloud engineering colleagues have been super busy with. As you may have seen on LinkedIn recently, we've just launched our AWS practice, which helps bring together all the good work we were previously doing within the firm into one centralized community of practice. And as a result, we're hiring from across industry to help bolster the strength of the practice. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the talks we've got coming up from Ashley, Elvia, and Mark.
Thank you very much, Deloitte. And we are also supported this evening by the good folks at Esynergy.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending the AWS User Group. I'm Adam Topping. I'm an account principal here at Esynergy. A little bit about us. We're a technology consultancy, and we build products, platforms, and services to accelerate value for our clients. We mainly work with leaders of scale-ups and enterprises in highly regulated industry sectors. The approach we take drives measurable impact that's tightly aligned to our clients' business objectives. In practice, this means high transparency, metric-driven reporting, and incremental handovers. The focus throughout all of our engagements is building our clients' capability. Our teams are small and highly functional, formed by our vetted ecosystem of associates, luminaires, and partners. And we use technology to fit our clients' needs. We're not opinionated around specific tech stacks and service offerings. To name a few of our clients, in payments, we work with Vtail, in banking, Northern Trust, in insurance, Marsh, and in government, we work with HMRC and the Crown Prosecution Service. If you'd like to know more, please reach out to me via LinkedIn or our website, esynergy.co.uk. I really hope you enjoy tonight.
Thanks, Adam and Esynergy. And we're also supported this evening by Sainsburys Tech, whose venue we have used in the past for meetups, and we would probably like to use again in future as well. Thank you, Sainsburys Tech, for your support. One of the ways in which our sponsors support us is they provide raffle prizes, and tonight we are, as ever, giving away, I believe, one Amazon Echo and 2 Amazon Echo Dots, and you can enter the prize draw by following the QR code there, or by following the link that Paul has put in the chat down there as well. Please do bear in mind that we can only send these prizes out to UK addresses. It looks, as far as I can tell, all of our 49 viewers right now are in the UK, but if you are not, you will need to either find somebody in the UK who could take a delivery for you, or not enter the prize draw, because you will be sad if you win and we can't post the prize to you. So do enter the prize draw. I'm going to be sharing that link again in between the talks, and we'll see who are the winners by the time we wrap up this evening. This evening we've got 2 talks tonight. We've got Ashley Ritchie and Elvia Securo, who both joined CloudReach in November 21 through CloudReach's Talent Academy program. Before that, Ashley had a cybersecurity background by education, and Elvia previously worked in online marketing and SEO. Today they're going to be sharing how they got started working in the cloud. And then shortly after that, we're going to be joined by Mark Gibault, who is CTO at Vtail, who are a healthcare platform. Mark's got 20 years experience building applications. It's about the same amount of time I've been in the industry. We probably have similar war stories or scars. And Mark is going to be sharing with us how Vtail built a fully serverless infrastructure to support their product. So without further ado, people always say that, don't they? It's a horrible turn of phrase. I hate hearing that on YouTube. But without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Ashley and Elvia to hear about their cloud journey.
Hi everyone, welcome to this AWS User Group session. Today, Ashley and I, who work together at CloudReach, multi-cloud services company, we will share with you our journey in the cloud industry. We are willing to keep this session mostly as a conversation, sharing our experiences and also giving some tips to the people who are willing to join this industry, or who have an interest in the cloud. I'm Elvia. I'm Italian, as you may have guessed by my accent, but I'm based in Berlin. I don't have any tech background, so I started my career in this field with no prior experiences. Actually, I studied foreign languages, I studied translation, and I worked for almost 10 years as a copywriter and a marketing manager. And during my last job experience, I was focusing more on SEO in the marketing field. So I had the chance to get to know what is going on behind the scenes. So what is happening on a website, what happened when we look at the screen and we see what we see on the website. And that was really interesting for me. So I decided that I wanted to know more. I started to do some self-studies. At my previous job, I had to work with some HTML. So I studied some CSS as well. And yeah, the more I studied, the more I was interested in this field, in the tech field. And yeah, so the pandemic came for me as for everyone else. And since I was working in the travel industry, I unfortunately was among those people who lost their job. So in this unlucky situation, I decided to take this as an opportunity. So I decided to enroll in a web development bootcamp, and so give a clear path to my studies. And I did this intensive bootcamp in JavaScript, and I worked on a couple of projects in team with other people. And so I thought that maybe it was the time to give it a try. So I started to apply to tech jobs. And yeah, it has been easy at all. Unfortunately, during this time, companies were not willing to hire people with no prior knowledge, with no prior background. So it was very tough, even to get a first interview. At the same time, I tried also to create a network around myself, to feel connected to other people in the tech community. Because after the bootcamp, I felt really somehow lost and alone. And I get in touch with Women Tech Makers community in Berlin, and I started to attend their meetups. And in one of their meetups, the speaker presented us the basics of cloud and the benefits of transitioning to cloud. And that was like a new idea for me coming into my mind as a field that I didn't consider that could be very interesting to look into. So I started to do some researches, and I started to have a look at AWS and their services. And at the same time, I found out through a referral from a person working at CloudReach that CloudReach, in cooperation, in partnership with AWS, was launching a talent academy for people either in the tech industry or with no tech background, but with a strong interest in cloud, to start a career in this field. And yeah, this is how my journey started, with this Talent Academy program at CloudReach, where I also met Ashley, who is actually one of my colleagues. So I will hand over to him to introduce himself.
Thanks, Elvia. So I'm Ashley, and I'm based in London. I have a background in cybersecurity, so I studied digital forensics and security. Yeah. And I was very struggling to get into the field of security. It's very, very difficult, and I found it very challenging. It was getting to the point where COVID started happening as well. And just before that, I'd secured a job as like a Java developer, which is not something that I'd thought I would have been doing, but it was a job, and, you know, keep my mind busy and everything, and learn new skills. And I do like learning new languages and scripting and programming and stuff like that. But unfortunately, because of COVID, much like Elvia, I got let go because of there being no clients, and they didn't want to. They didn't have the funds to train up anymore. So I went back to job hunting, and after applying, getting all the rejections and everything, I had a recommendation for joining this talent academy with CloudReach from my brother, who worked in sales. So he recommended that I start learning more about AWS through a cloud guru. So I started going through a course just to learn how AWS worked and what it could do. As through my education, I'd always been taught very basically about the cloud, but apart from scaling up, scaling out, I didn't really know what other features they offered and how it worked. And it's not something that I'd really thought about, to be honest, as a career. But then comes along the Talent Academy with CloudReach, which has been amazing for me. And the training that we went through for 3 months has taught me so much. It was very structured, having theory in the mornings and then actually having the time to do practical work as well, and deploying what you had learned, which is something that doing myself is before CloudReach was very difficult, because you have the free tier account, and I was always a bit scared. Oh, should I do this? Should I do that? It might cost me thousands, you know. And it was great to have like a dedicated a lab account and to be able to just go wild and do everything. So we learned Terraform, which is infrastructure as code, and again, that really helped me learn, because it taught me how many different services there are in AWS and how they all link together, especially first creating our VPCs and what you needed and how to route everything together, which was very interesting. How did you find the training, Elvia?
Yeah, so those 3 months were very interesting, but at the same time very intense. Yeah, we had a very a steep learning curve, and for me it was everything new, because I was completely new to the cloud, and new to AWS, and something that really helped me a lot was combining the theory with hands-on projects. So learning what an EC2 instance is, and at the same time applying what I learned with Terraform, deploying an instance and hosting a website on the instance I deployed. So having this hands-on experience was really important for me. And also sharing, so having the senior cloud developers sharing their knowledge and experience with us was super important, and having the feeling that I was not alone in my learning path, because every time I had a question, there was someone ready and willing to answer. Not only senior people, but also people in the same program like you, Ashley. You helped me a lot with your knowledge, with your background and your answers. So I'd say that it has been a fun period, but also 3 months where I learned a lot. And during these 3 months, I was able to secure my cloud practitioner certification. And after that, new challenges came because we finished the training, and I wasn't assigned to a project, so I had to spend some weeks on the bench, as we say, and there I had to face different challenges. One of them was for sure planning my time, because I went from having a very tight schedule, a whole day of meetings, to nothing. So I had to keep myself motivated, keep studying, keep working on projects to have hands-on experience, and at the same time keep networking with other people in the company. And yeah, at the end of this period, I was able to get my Solution Architect Associate certification. And this gave me a lot of strength, because I think it's the basic certification that developers need if they want to work with AWS services. And so that has been very important, an important goal to reach for me. What about you, Ashley?
Yeah, so again, it's very much the same story as you. So I got my cloud practitioner during the 3 months that we'd been training. And then after the training finished, while I was waiting for a client engagement, continuing to study and then getting the Solutions Architect Associate, and now working towards others such as the developer and other little things like Terraform certifications as well, which will be very much helpful for us. Yeah, I'd like to reiterate, it's very, very helpful having all of these senior architects and senior CSDs and CSDs in CloudReach, having to be able to reach out to them, and especially having 19 other people in our Talent Academy program that we could ask any questions, and everyone came from different backgrounds, and we were all in the kind of the same level, so we all helped each other move along, and we are all doing amazingly right now. I think going through the training, we had our a challenge week, so we had worked for 2 weeks in a like a project environment. So we worked with agile methodologies and had our stand-ups every morning, and split down into sprints. It was very interesting for me, learning throughout my education about working that way, and I'd never actually done it. So being able to collaborate as a team and work together to get to this end goal was very fun for me, and being able to support each other, delegate tasks, saying, "Oh yes, I know that, I can do that." And me and Elvia were actually in the same group, so we definitely helped each other get to the end of that. So yeah, so what advice do you think you would give to people that are interested within this AWS industry?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think the first tip I can give is, if you're interested in the cloud, start maybe by taking the AWS Cloud Practitioner certification, because it actually gives you a basic understanding and a general idea of the AWS services and of what cloud is and what are actually the benefits of transitioning to cloud. And if you're really willing to start a career in this field, it's very important to create a network around yourself. So to start being part of the community, because meeting people and talking, sharing, you can get new ideas, you can get inspiration, you can also know about new job opportunities, which is always nice to know about it. And the last tip is, for sure, keep studying. I know it's hard, especially when you're looking for a job and you're studying alone, so you're self-studying, but it's very important to keep updates with all the new technologies that they're coming on every day, and keep practicing, because for me this helped me to be motivated and to keep trying. And it's difficult, but you can get lucky and you can have your chance. So just keep being motivated and keep be up to date and study a lot. I don't know, what are your tips, Ashley? What do you recommend?
I think I'll just add on to yours that yeah, if you're very proactive with your learning and you don't want to just study to pass an exam, you want to study to gain the knowledge and be able to apply that in the real world. So if you have little side projects that you could work on to kind of reinforce that learning while you go along the path of getting certified is amazing, and I think will very much help you. And touching on Elvia's note as well about networking, if you have the chance to go to any of the AWS events like the summit that was recently in London, then totally go forward for it, because creating that network and getting to know people within the industry and the ecosystem of AWS is so much more important for you, and you'll be able to learn all these stories of how they've done things, and all the training people that will be there as well. You can attend free training sessions and benefit from that. So I hope you've all enjoyed our stories, and I hope they inspire you or you've learned something. But we'll be around for any more questions if you have any. But thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm joined on the stream this evening by Elvia and Ashley, who you should now all be able to see. Thanks for putting that talk together. It's really interesting to hear your journey. I guess got into cloud from a sort of having been a technologist working with servers and sort of doing things in what used to exist before the cloud. So it was sort of natural progression for me. But it seems like, I guess you're starting from, not from scratch necessarily, but from a sort of an earlier kind of place. And I wonder, Elvia, how did it feel, I guess, to go from something that was kind of, I guess, technical but not necessarily cloud oriented, and make that leap? Like, was it difficult to decide to do that? What were the things that made it easier for you?
Hi, John. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us today. And yeah, for me, it was difficult, but I think now, if I look back to when my journey started, I'm 100% sure that it was the right way to go. And for me, the main difficulty was that I didn't have any technical background at all. But once I started to study and to look into AWS services, and with practice, of course, everything started to make sense for me. So if there is anyone now that is thinking to start having a look at AWS service and having a career in the cloud, I highly recommend that, for sure.
Thanks, Elvia. And actually, you had a background in cybersecurity, so presumably there was some overlap in what you've learned in AWS and what you learned on your degree, I guess. Like, how did that help?
I think it helped quite a lot. Now looking back, definitely scripted knowledge, and I'm not really a programmer sort, but I've learned I think Python about four or five times, to be honest. I keep forgetting, but it's put me in that frame of mind of when I'm going to AWS and looking to develop on the platform. Gotcha.
Good stuff. Just as a message to those of you in the chat, if you have questions of your own for Elvia and Ashley, do drop them in there. I will do my best to get them into the conversation. I can see from the chat that's going on there are a few people who are also kind of early on in their journey, and sort of this might be kind of relevant for you. So do take the opportunity to ask those questions. Elvia, you mentioned that you heard a speaker talking about this, that you sort of found the cloud opportunity through listening to a speaker, and you said that they told you some benefits of getting into a cloud career. I'm wondering what they sold you, and have those things turned out to be accurate now that you're actually made that jump?
Yeah, definitely. Pretty accurate. The flexibility and the cost saving and that you have when transitioning to cloud, and or when you are thinking to start a company and with a very low budget, it's something that you cannot have in a traditional environment. So I have to say that they solved that very well. And yeah.
And you found that to be true when you're now that you're actually working in the industry.
Yeah, definitely.
Great stuff. And what about you? Actually, you said your brother kind of suggested this, and that your brother's in sales. So how did he sell this to you? And was it the case that he got a kickback for inviting you to join CloudRich?
No, it wasn't that. It was all intentional and probably love. But yeah, it was. To be honest, he'd mentioned it in the past as well, so it wasn't the first time. But then it was the right time because he had come across and found this talent academy and thought, oh yeah, this would be really great for me. And yeah, it has turned out that way. But I'd always heard about the cloud, like I mentioned in my talk as well, and it was always this thing we knew about the scaling and like high availability of it, but I never really understood it at technological perspective kind of thing. So yeah, it was shout out to my brother who got me here. But
is he watching tonight? Has he joined the stream? I know.
Maybe I told him and sent him a link, so maybe.
If you're watching, Ashley's brother, good job, well done, good sales job. What was the most difficult thing about your learning journey so far? Maybe Ashley, you start with that.
I think managing my time was really the biggest thing, and trying to divide up the theory from the practical. So the talent academy was very good for this. So we had like a set time in the morning, say 9 to 12, learning the theory behind a service, and then having the time for ourselves to practice it and understand it. It gave me the structure that I needed to go forward and learn with it.
So it was the academy. Were the mornings, were they taught? Did you have a sort of classroom sort of set up online, I suppose, rather than in person, or were you sort of left to your own devices with an Amazon account and kind of left to fend for yourself?
Yeah, so it was. So the mornings were colleagues giving speeches and our trainer and teaching us about the service and how it's used and what it's used for, and how then we can use it as well. And then we was given tasks, or we was able to play around on a lab account to get a better understanding of it.
Yeah. And Elvia, what did you find the most difficult about making this journey?
For me, I have to say that the greatest difficulty maybe is now that I'm actually on a customer project. So applying what I've learned in real life scenarios and very complex structure, having to do multiple accounts and federated access. So you get or new services, AWS services as well. So I'm getting the chance to get into complex stuff, and I think that this is challenging. So applying what I've learned, but this is also continue to learn for me, because every time I have to try something new, I can learn a lot. So yeah, it's difficult, but it's a good exercise for sure.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like an actual client engagement where they're paying you to know the thing to really kind of force you to get to grips with it and really kind of understand it. It's yeah, I've often found that's a great way of learning something pretty quickly. So we do have a couple of questions from the chat. There's a question from TJ, who is currently undergoing a master's degree program in data science and would like to develop technical capability in cloud computing. Good job. TJ asks, how can I get hands-on projects that can aid my learning experience? Do either of you have an answer for that?
First of all, you can just check on AWS. They have a lot of hands-on lab that you can practice on, which are very useful. And just try to develop them, not using the console, because most of the time they are designed for you to use the console. Just try to develop the solution programmatically, and this will help you a lot. It's a good starting point, I think.
Great, thanks, Elvia. Anything to add to that, Ashley?
No, what Elvia said is, I think, spot on. There's a lot of AWS like workspaces out there, and guides and little tasks that you can do. I know we recently did one with the Kubernetes service EKS, which was really useful. But yeah, there's lots out there, and I'm sure if you hit us up on LinkedIn, we can send some links over as well.
Great, thanks, Ashley. Yeah, and I guess I could add, TJ, if you have the opportunity to join an AWS Game Day, which are run by the training and certification team at Amazon. They have a set of kind of hands-on scenarios that you kind of work through over some number of like 2 or 3 hours. You mentioned data science. There might actually be a data science / big data game day. I'm not sure. I most recently did the security one. It was really good sort of way of getting hands-on with quite a lot of stuff. And it's fun as well. They tend to sort of weave a story around it and make it kind of interesting. So keep an eye out for those. I think that those teams tend to promote those things. There is a website for Amazon Game Days or AWS Game Days, and I've seen people on LinkedIn mention those, some Amazon people. So keep an eye out for that. United Shady asks, how were you able to go deep into services where you set tasks and projects to build with those services? Ashley, let's start with you today.
Yeah, so it was basically the same thing. So we had AWS trainers who were giving us tasks and being able to do that. And I feel Terraform as well was really helpful in understanding a service and how like it interconnected with other services as well. If you're just using the AWS console and you're launching I don't know what to say, like an EC2 or something, or like a VPC, sometimes you don't understand how it all connects with like root tables and subnets and stuff like that. And Terraform really helps me kind of grasp the ladder going up kind of thing.
Yeah, I found that with Terraform as well. The kind of the way that Terraform is documented is almost makes it easier to learn everything else. I think that the API documentation for AWS is not quite as extensive. So yeah, Terraform documentation, if you're using Terraform, great way of learning AWS. Anything to add to that, Elvia?
Not really. But yeah, as Ashley said, trying to develop things programmatically, even either with Terraform or using CloudFormation as well. It's very useful. So yeah.
Great.
I agree with Ashley.
Excellent. You're obviously on the same page in quite a lot of these things. They've obviously trained you really well. First time chatter today, Gavin Cornwell asks the last question that I'm going to ask from the audience, which is which service have you enjoyed using the most or has been the most useful, Elvia?
I'm not sure how to answer. I use a lot EC2 instances, so the virtual servers. But I really don't have an answer. Everything is kind of interconnected, so some services have dependencies, and yeah, I don't know which one is my preference.
Cool. Ashley, do you have a favourite one that you've enjoyed using the most?
It's quite a difficult question. It's favorite, possibly Lambda at the moment. I'm not very good at it, but it's a very cool service to use, and we're currently getting our developer associate as well certification, so we're going to have the chance to use it a lot more.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, Lambda is it's extremely powerful, and it's kind of used as glue in all sorts of other AWS places. So yeah, learning Lambda is definitely worth doing. And our next speaker, Mark, is going to be talking at length about serverless technologies, including Lambda. So that's a great segue for us to say thanks for joining, Elvia and Ashley. It's been great to hear about your journey. I hope maybe you'll come back in a year's time and share kind of where you've got to as a result of using this stuff in the real world with that actual paying customers, because I think the ongoing journey is interesting. So hopefully we'll see you again.
Yeah, it will be a pleasure. Thanks.
Great, thanks very much. That's Elvia and Ashley. So I will just briefly share again the raffle, because we probably have a few people who've joined the stream more recently. I can tell we've got I think we've got someone from Brazil. Jonathan from Brazil has joined. I think Jonathan, you might be the only person who's joined the stream who is not in the UK, and Brazil is I think a place we've not had an AWS User Group UK joiner from. So congrats. There's no prize for that, sorry. I mean, I guess the prize is you get to live in Brazil, where it's probably a bit warmer than it is here. But welcome. It's good to have you here. Anyway, I was going to share this with you again, which is the sponsors prize draw. If you'd like to win an Amazon Echo or an Amazon Echo Dot, those are the first, second, and third prizes. Then you can enter the prize draw. I'm sure Paul is about to share the link to that in the chat as well, or you can use the QR code that's on the screen there. Please do note, particularly if you're Jonathan and you're in Brazil, we cannot deliver prizes to non-UK addresses. So please don't enter if you are not in the UK, or you can't accept a UK delivery, or you'll be sad if you win and you don't get to have your prize. We will be announcing the winners of the prize draw after the next talk, which is coming up right now. In fact, we are going to hear from Mark Gibaud about how his company Vtail have built a serverless healthcare platform. Over to you, Mark.
Evening, everyone. So I'll be talking to you tonight about building a 100% serverless healthcare platform in AWS. My name is Mark Gibaud, and I am the CTO at Vtail. At Vtail, we're building a platform to connect US clinicians to the product reps and the sales reps of medical product companies that provide those clinicians with information about those products. So just like us in tech, they have a hard time keeping up with the innovation in their industry around medical products. And so we're building a platform for them to stay connected and keep up to date. So far, we have video calling, chat, news feed, a searchable medical products database, and then we've got a matching algorithm to match clinicians with their local reps from those companies. Right now we're building a course catalog so they can find online courses to go on as well, and making a searchable database of those. So if we look at the technology paradigm, so we started with a blank slate in October 2020. I wanted to try and avoid some of the bigger mistakes that I had seen on previous projects that I worked on. Chief among those was Kubernetes. I know Kubernetes is very popular, but I'd seen entire DevOps teams kind of get swallowed up trying to get, deployment figured out using Kubernetes. So serverless was maturing nicely in 2020, I would say. And we decided to go down that route, and I eventually came to call our approach managed serverless. So that's a mashup of the AWS managed services and serverless as kind of the main runtime. So we provision a serverless platform via or using serverless framework mainly, and then some Pulumi on the side. And Pulumi, for those that don't know, is just basically a TypeScript layer over Terraform. So far we have no running boxes on our platform, no running servers. The other mistake that I'd seen in previous projects was either building your own stuff when you are probably better advised to pick some vendors to solve the same kind of commoditized problems. So either not using vendors at all, or sometimes even worse, using the wrong vendors. So we've lent quite heavily into trying to pick the best-in-class vendors for some of the functionalities that we want on the Vtail platform. So you can see some of them there. We use Twilio for video calls. We use Stream for chat, Branch for app download attribution, Algolia for search, SendGrid for emails, etc. So we wanted to optimize for speed of delivery, and I think this has kind of got us most of the way there. We'll talk a little bit more about how using so many vendors can play well with an event-driven architecture. So this is a quick sort of summary of the front of the back end, if you like. So pretty straightforward architecture there. So we have Appsync and we have API Gateway. So we've got probably a dozen APIs through API Gateway, REST APIs for generating tokens or image uploads or webhook destinations or things of that nature. But most of our traffic actually goes through the Appsync server. So we have dozens of mapping templates, some written in Apache Velocity template language, which we'll see in a second, others going through Lambda, but one way or another they often save data to a Dynamo database. If we look at the back of the back end, if you like, this is where we get into our event-driven architecture. So I've taken a sample API here called create item. So that might be an Appsync mutation, and that might be a expressed as a VTL template or a Lambda, but either way data gets saved into the Dynamo database, and then we offload a lot of work to the async kind of backend workers. The main way we do that is using a creatively named Lambda called the Dynamo Stream Manager that has an event source of the Dynamo stream itself. And so that's kind of where you can get the old image and the new image of any database changes and kind of diff quite richly to understand what data has changed. So in this case, we understand that a new item has been created in the database. At that point, we save a new event into EventBridge called item.created, and then any number of things can happen. So if a user was updated, we replicate some of our user details over to Stream, our chat provider. So that Lambda there might just update those user attributes in Stream. Or if a newsfeed item was posted, we might replicate that out to Contentful, where the app can download it later. Those newsfeed items. And then if a new user is created, then we use branch.io to provision that user with a new or unique share URL. And that actually works quite well. And yeah, so here you can see some code that just a range of methods that actually diff through changed data and translate that changed data into a event. It does require some eventually consistent thinking, and so what I mean by that is perhaps in another system you generate a share URL before saving a user to the database. And then in that case, you could say that a share URL was mandatory on the schema of a clinician. In this case, this is our GraphQL schema, but in our case, because we add a share URL to the user after they've been created, share URL here needs to be optional, and that means in certain edge cases, perhaps if branch was down, a user could not have a share URL, and in the app you need to do some null checking and some sort of error pop-up for that case. But we think it's worth the trade-off. The front end, the sort of front of the front end APIs can remain very simple and fast as well, because they're not doing much work. And then offloading some of the work onto the back end, you can take slightly longer, or you can be more flexible in terms of the duration and turnarounds of those Lambdas. And also retriability is kind of built into the system. So Lambdas with an async event source automatically retry twice. Most times that's enough. If you get some sort of error, branches down or just a connection error or something. Otherwise, we've provisioned a dead letter queue for most of these Lambdas, and if branch is down for several hours and comes back up, we just redrive those messages, and the user eventually does get their share L. We've also got up and running with Appsync. So what does Appsync bring to the picture? First and foremost, obviously, it's GraphQL. That gets you out of worrying about HTTP concerns anymore. So choosing verbs and designing response codes and having those response codes treated a certain way by the clients, etc., etc. So I'm old enough to remember SOAP web services, and REST was definitely an improvement over those. But ultimately, you sort of still were made to care about quite a lot of lower level concerns with REST. And GraphQL is nice in that it sort of gets you a little bit closer to the business language when talking about things. We've also found the schema is easier to manage and evolve. Some of this is about doing TypeScript front to back, and we generate some TypeScript types from our GraphQL schema. So a few different things in play there, but generally we found it easier than the old days of generating Swagger config and trying to keep things in sync from that perspective. Totally doable, but less work these days with GraphQL. And then what is Appsync? I think I've got a quick example here of we find it quite natural to bring in GraphQL schema into our technical specifications for features. Again, there's no sort of verbs and response codes here. It's quite easy and natural to understand kind of what make up objects when you're using GraphQL schemas. So Appsync is obviously AWS's managed service, managed GraphQL service. The main thing we like about Appsync is that it's wired quite nicely into other AWS services like Cognito and Dynamo. Here is a part of our schema that for which we have two sort of admin mutations that we'd like to lock down to a Cognito group called Vtail admins, which is our sort of customer ops group. And it's nice to be able to do those with a single attribute or decorator and be done. And I think I've got an example here of a Dynamo or an Appsync mapping resolver that wires straight into Dynamo. So this gets you around having to have a Lambda, potentially with a cold start or even a warm start Lambda. The duration of a Vtail mapping template into Dynamo is very fast. This one typically completes in about 45 milliseconds. And this is obviously a clinician getting their own data. So it's obviously a very popular or common API that gets hit. So it's nice to have the option to optimize for speed there. And of course, Appsync supports WebSockets stuff, so GraphQL subscriptions. And we found a great use case for that, which I'll explain now. So we have video calling on the Vtail platform, and we use VoIP notifications to begin that journey. So the first kind of piece is quite a basic use case, not including GraphQL subscriptions just yet. But the first thing that happens is a caller hits a video call invite API. That API has the receiver ID. The receiver ID then gets a VoIP notification. And while that's happening, the caller just goes ahead and joins a Twilio video room and waits for a receiver to connect. The receiver gets their VoIP notification, and that's what kind of brings this screen up on your phone. If the receiver then accepts that call, the code is fairly straightforward to write to have that receiver just join the video, the Twilio video room, the ID of which is sent in the payload of that VoIP invite. So that's the kind of happy case, and that's all well and good. But the question is then whether either the caller sort of cancels the call or the receiver declines the incoming call. In that case, if the caller cancels, the receiver's phone carries on ringing, and vice versa. So you're actually on the hook for exchanging, the data to say that somebody's cancelled the call. I remember thinking there must be something like a VoIP notification that you can send again with some kind of cancellation token or something, but that's not actually the case. You're on the hook for doing this yourself. Level 2, as it were, was that the caller actually creates a call item in the database using a mutation called update call status. And then after running that mutation, the caller then issues a GraphQL subscription to that mutation. So any invocations of that mutation by any clients will feed that data, the changed data, back to the caller. After that, you can just see our some examples of our clinician calls in the database here. And there's the subscription itself expressed in the schema. Subscribe to any mutations called update call status, and when that happens, give me an object called update call status output. After that initial operation, the receiver gets their video call invite VoIP notification as normal. That has the call ID in the payload as well. And that receiver also, on receipt of that VoIP notification, sets up their own subscription on that call ID to update call status mutation. So that is, so then you have both the caller and the receiver subscribing to that mutation. When somebody then cancels the call, cancels or declines the call, they run the mutation again, and the call status is updated to ended. And the caller, the person who didn't create that mutation gets an update that call status has changed, and that's when you know to cancel the call on the person who didn't press cancel. So this is quite compelling and didn't take a ton of work to set up, and we're particularly excited around the group calling situation. We want to build the feature eventually when a clinician can call multiple people, say 5 people at a time, because actually they don't care who they talk to, they just want an answer to their question. So they could call 5 people, and then if the first one picks up, then you want to be able to cancel the other 4 quite quickly. So Appsync is certainly useful, but has its quirks. It's got 3 log levels. One is none, one is error, and one is all. The all log level is quite verbose, so there are probably some cost questions there at scale, but more than that, it will log PII, because it basically logs the entire payload, etc. So that was a kind of a non-starter for us, but unfortunately when you set your log level to error, it does not log schema validation errors. So schema validation errors are when you ask for something that the schema doesn't have, some field or attribute that is not in the schema, because potentially things have gotten out of sync, or if you ask for something that is in the schema but is not fulfillable by Appsync because the data is perhaps not in the database. Both of those are schema validations and schema validation errors that don't get logged by Appsync. So our workaround is actually to log those from Sentry on the client, because the client obviously does get notified of those errors. I did explain the situation to customer support and said it would be nice if any kind of errors were logged when the log level is error, and they said that they have logged a ticket with the feature team, so we'll see, maybe that improves in future. And secondly, we have Datadog in play, and Datadog alerts set up to inform us via Slack of any errors in the Lambdas. Those errors in the sort of general lambdas are obviously logged as logging.error, so the error level, which is all fine. But Appsync does not log at the error level. It logs everything as info, just kind of one of the quirks really. And so we need to do some extra things in Datadog to be able to be informed of those errors. So this is a query you can see in the middle there. This is a Datadog alert or a monitor as they call it, but we actually have to amend the query not to just give us everything with status error, but in this case give us things with status info with the errors attribute or array greater than 0 items. So a little bit of, well, that's the easy way to get it going. Datadog for more advanced use cases does have the concept of log post-processing. So you could sort of rewrite your logs. And in this case, this is setting up something to rewrite the status to error, the status key to error value when the field in error attribute of the log statement is true, and that is the case for Appsync errors. So multiple options there, but a little bit of extra stuff to do in your monitoring platform to keep on top of any Appsync errors. So lastly, we'll take a quick look at EventBridge. So I've got a slide here called EventBridge, the tool. The tool is, for me, the slightly less exciting part of it. In terms of the new way to develop software these days. It's got the concept of a rule, and so a rule is just a mapping from mapping of an event to a target, and a target can be a Lambda, or it can be another API in API gateway, or it can be a AWS API destination, or it can be an SQS or SNS queue, and it can also be another event bridge in the same account or in a different account. So a variety of options there, but the max targets is 5, and so if you want more than 5 things to happen on a single event, you're going to have to rework your architecture a little bit. We haven't hit this rule yet, but it did occur to me as a very un-AWS kind of limit, because they normally give you 10 times of what you need, certainly to start out with. The latency can be up to half a second to invoke a target. So if you have time sensitive things like our previous VoIP notification example, for our VoIP notifications we still have gone with SQS, because that's typically 50 milliseconds or even shorter. And then it can also ingest third-party events or events from third parties like Datadog. So that kind of gets you around needing to provision, webhooks over HTTP. It's probably a slightly faster and more scalable way to do things. But the slightly more exciting part for me is EventBridge, the enabler. So this is a little markdown file that I actually just created for this talk. It lists most of our core events. And what we found very quickly is that they serve as a nice kind of map of the platform. So any new starter can really get to grips quite easily with how the business works, or how the sort of business rules are implemented in the platform. And these are all first-class EventBridge events, and so they have these events serve as the sources, the event sources of Lambdas. So it's easy to sort of track what happens where. And then the second thing, sort of off the back of that, is new incoming requirements can often be expressed just as a new Lambda with one of these current events as the event source, to be able to say send a new email to a clinician when they update their profile or get updated, or a new push notification when a new company is added to the platform. So it gets us, again, like I said a bit earlier, it gets us more easily talking about the business in terms of the business language, and helps with communication with our stakeholders, etc. So my little markdown file is cool there to start off with, but you can imagine as things scale, you can imagine better solutions for these things. So EventBridge Canon is basically a postman for your EventBridge. So you can kind of in a local development environment play around with event schemas and sort of publish events to your EventBridge and then be testing your sort of invoked Lambdas much more easily than maybe the command line, etc. And then Atlas is a way to point, or you can point Atlas to your EventBridge instance, and it will scan your schema registry and kind of collect data about your events there, and then you can generate an API-like documentation site. So Slate is one format that it supports, and you can, you've probably seen documentation sites in Slate before around APIs. I think Stripe's API docs are in Slate, and so you can get the same thing for your EventBridge events. So the tool around scaling this stuff is coming along, and it would help you. I can easily imagine that it helps you keep things sane and sensible when you've got dozens of developers and several product teams, etc. So just to finish up, my takeaways are, there's a lot to learn actually at the infrastructure configuration level. 5 or 10 years ago, application developers were much less sort of involved in infrastructure config. Now you've got to learn as an application developer what your Lambda account level concurrency is, what's the max number of targets for an EventBridge event, that Cognito can only send 50 emails a day before you need to do some extra work to integrate SES, things of that nature. But ultimately, it's still an exciting space to work. It's still very quick thing. We still develop and deploy things in days, maybe weeks, rather than months where I've been before. And I also have not you don't typically finish a project and start a new one the next day and want to use all the same stuff, most of the same stuff again. I've left projects before and said, I'm just never using those things again. I've learned how not to do it. But with the serverless event-driven architecture paradigm, I would use a lot of the same things again if I were to start a new project tomorrow. That said, the only thing I do think is missing in action still, with the greatest respect to the Aurora Serverless V2 team, is a true serverless relational database system from AWS. So Aurora Serverless 2 isn't quite there yet because it doesn't sort of scale to 0, and it can't easily be part of an ephemeral stack of when we've got 20 developer stacks inside a single AWS account, etc. But it will probably, it feels like it's evolving. It'll become that in time, I think. But we still are only using Dynamo, and we have a couple of parts of the Vtail platform that would fit better into a relational database paradigm, and so we're actually looking at CockroachDB or PlanetScale or one of the vendor relational databases for those. And that's all I had. So I hope that was interesting and useful. Happy to take any questions.
Great stuff from Mark, who joins me right now on thanks to the magic of Skype. Hello, Mark. Whereabouts in the world are you? You're in the UK, right?
Yes, Southeast London. So
right.
Also another London one.
But that accent is not a Southeast London accent. Where are you from originally?
Originally South Africa, yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. We actually have somebody joining us from Zimbabwe, according to the chat, which might be our furthest. Actually, I don't know. Is Zimbabwe further away than Brazil? Someone do the maths and let me know. That might be the distance winner. Anyway, Mark, thanks for sharing details of your endeavours. Does serverless live up to the promise? Is it cheaper? Is it easier? Is it faster? Is it more scalable?
I generally, obviously I'm very biased now. I generally think so. I think there is, it's not a silver bullet. There's tons of stuff to learn, but it's certainly it was fast to begin for Vtail when we had a small team, or a smaller team than we have now. We still got a pretty small team, but we started quite quickly. We built and launched an MVP in 3 months, and that doesn't tell you everything you need to know necessarily. But the thing I have noticed is that we've maintained velocity, so things have scaled out and become sort of more complex, but that hasn't actually slowed everything down, just because everything's remains. Deployments still take about 9 minutes. Lots of Lambdas are doing small things, so tweaking any one thing is still kind of as simple as it was in month 2 or 3. So I think it scales really well across, more developers and eventually more teams, hopefully. But it's not a silver bullet, and there's still plenty to learn.
And was that sort of rapidity? That's a shit word, isn't it? It was that quickness of getting to market predicated on having a particular skill level in the team? Like, was this all kind of people who'd worked with serverless before? Were you learning as you went? Like, how did that look?
Yeah, so we did contract a specialist consultancy that specialized in serverless, so I sort of chose that technology and then looked around for specialists. So we did have people that knew what they were doing, both on the serverless and Lambda as a runtime thing, and also Dynamo, because I didn't mention it in the presentation, but we do use single table design to be able to use Dynamo for our only real database. There was some prior experience.
Right. Yeah. So you kind of leaning on expertise from the market rather than necessarily building it all in house. Which, as someone who's running a consultancy, that's a really great idea. You should all do that where necessary. But yeah, that seems. I mean, it seems like that contributed to the success, right? You don't sort of make the mistakes that everybody's made, because the people that you've hired have done that on their previous projects, and they bring the good stuff to you.
Yeah, and then off the back of that, we no longer, we rolled off with that consultancy, and I hired a couple of developers that I'd worked with before previously, and these guys were actually React Native specialists, and they were able to adapt to a full stack environment quite a lot easier, given that it was serverless, and a lot of the patterns were figured out, and a lot of the patterns didn't change over time dramatically, and were fairly straightforward even for React Native specialists. So that's got serverless has got that going for it as well. It's relatively simple to learn the basics.
Great. And you're doing stuff in the healthcare kind of arena, so that immediately for me sort of sounds the compliance, security, PII alarms. What are the things that you've had to bear in mind or treat differently in that landscape than you would have done had you not been building a healthcare app?
So it's mostly, as you say, around compliance and data protection. The regulation in the healthcare industry, we're in the US market, by the way, and it's HIPAA. That is the big one there. The quickest thing to learn about HIPAA is that it's pretty dated. It is actually, just first in 1996 published as law, and it's had a couple of updates since, but basically GDPR is a lot tighter than HIPAA. But basically, you can just do, what we, I think, in 2022 regard as common good practice around data security and encryption at rest and in transit, etc., and you'd be completely up with the regulation. There are some things at the edge, like they've got a super version of PII, which is PHI, Protected Health Information. We have our chat system that our users could potentially exchange PHI in the chat system. We've actually offloaded that. We don't store our own chat messages. We store them in our provider called Stream, and we've signed a BAA with them, which is a HIPAA thing. So we've offloaded some of that work and otherwise done the basics really well, I think.
Yeah, good. I guess you mentioned common security good practice. I think the thing I've learned over the last few years is that it's not actually that common. It's as common as common sense. It's not evenly distributed, but it's reassuring to know that people who are working in the healthcare sector do follow those kind of things. I guess you wouldn't be allowed to trade otherwise, right? You get sort of audited, and the people who were buying from you would go, oh no, thanks very much. You seem not to be for us. So yeah, good stuff there. So a couple of questions from the chat. One that came in sort of fairly early on when you were talking about sort of best in class services. How do you determine which particular third party offering is a best in class when they all have their advocates? For example, why SendGrid and not SES?
Yep, really good question. It's the first thing I can say is it is completely subjective to a degree. I think there are various ways that you can kind of do some due diligence to understand the landscape of a lot of vendor options before kind of diving in. I've been guilty in the past, in previous lifetimes and projects of kind of picking the first thing that looks about right and then going straight in. But I think taking some time, days or weeks to understand the landscape and compare and contrast providers before making what is essentially a long-term commitment is definitely par for the course. I ask around a lot, fellow CTOs, people have got war stories. There's always word on the street about this vendor or that vendor kind of not having a good integration experience, etc. So yeah, look around a lot, get invited to demos or organize demos with the vendors, read the documentation. Documentation over the last decade has really become one of the selling points of the big vendors that really do documentation properly, pay a lot of attention to the developer experience. One trick I like to do is use Crunchbase to understand people's vendors' funding history. If they've raised a lot of money and they've raised progressively more money over the years, then you know that they're on a good pathway, or can reasonably assume that they're on a good pathway. And then the other thing I like to do as well when looking at vendors is ask for their public roadmaps, or some of them maybe you have to sign an NDA, but you can get hold of their sort of where they're going to invest, hopefully some fresh funding over the next 12 months, and using that you can understand whether they're a sort of long-term fit, or how aligned they are with which parts of their product you want to use versus which ones they are investing in. That said, the SendGrid example was brought up. Some providers I'm a little bit more ambivalent about than others in our stack. SendGrid is kind of it does what it says on the tin, but it doesn't set our world on fire. The Stream chat is really compelling. I recommend anybody thinking about a chat vendor to look at Stream first. And then, some of the popular names, Algolia for search, and Contentful is emerging as a really compelling headless CMS provider. So we think we've got it more right than not.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. I guess if you're bringing consultants in, they kind of bring their opinions to add to the mix as well. And I think the thing that sort of chimed really for me, because I guess that's how we know each other outside of this community, right? We sort of hang out in the same CTO circles, and that community is a really good way of finding out sort of how things are going for people. I think that if there's a theme for this evening, it's kind of that. I think Elvia and Ashley were talking about sort of community of practice and sort of learning from each other. You've mentioned this in the case of vendor selection. This in itself is a community event, and I believe really strongly in the power of community. So it's good to hear that's working for you as well. One question from the chat as well that actually I was going to ask, but it's great that Matt Crocs 1985 is asking, first time caller he's a fellow Safa. Matt, are you in the UK, or are you actually in South Africa right now? You can answer that whilst I ask you a question of Mark. Matt is asking, how do you set up developer serverless environments? Are you using shared kind of lower tier environments, or do you sort of end-to-end stack per developer? Like, how does that work when you're trying to change all of these sort of disparate moving parts? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so that's a really compelling story so far. So we use each developer has their own stack, all top to bottom serverless, a complete sort of isomorphic version of production, and we have about 4 or 5 developers flexing depending on who's doing what and what time of the year it is, type thing. But then we have an integration test pack that runs and deploys we have about 25 of these. They also deploy their own stack. So we have an AWS developer account development account with 30 or 40 stacks in it, and it seems to cope okay at the moment. So it's really powerful for each developer to have their own complete copy of production in that way, with no sort of mocks or clones or no mocks. It just means that we then further have a staging and then obviously a production environment. It means that our staging environment is actually way more solid and reliable than previous staging environments from previous projects that I've worked in, where the staging environment is kind of the first place you start to understand everything, whether everything works together. So yeah, that's a really compelling story. And some of my criticism of Aurora Serverless v2 and that it doesn't scale to 0 means it doesn't fit into that concept of an ephemeral stack as easily as Dynamo and other things as well.
Yes, because it's still generating cost for each of those things, which I guess is the trade-off for the fast warm-up time, right? The use case I think for Aurora Serverless is more kind of production workloads, whereas I can see the benefit of being able to scale it down entirely for a dev workload. So maybe that's coming. Maybe that's V3. Let's see. A question from Gavin Cornwell, who asks, do you have one large deployment for the whole system, or do you split it up into microservices? I guess that's a question about how you get your software live, and I'm kind of interested in are you sort of bought into the code deploy stuff and its sort of native integration, or are you using one of the third-party CI tools for that?
Yeah, we've gone Circle CI for deployment, and as I mentioned there, we use Serverless Framework. We were very lucky that we started in October 2020, and that December 2020 reInvent, they upped the CloudFormation stack limit, resource limit from 200, which was quite tight, to 500. So that gave us a load of headroom to not actually have to split out our microservices or split out our serverless stacks way more earlier than we would have had to have done. We've actually just done this over the last 2 or 3 months, converting over to Serverless Framework v3, which is a big upgrade. And now splitting up stacks as well, and it's totally doable. Serverless Framework have some newer tools, one called Serverless Compose, which allow you to manage separate stacks more effectively or with less effort. So we're starting to do that now, but we haven't had to do that for a long time. The other big contributor is Appsync. I think Appsync allows you to get away with fewer resources than a REST API with 50 or 60 individual REST APIs with their log groups, etc., all taking up resources. So good.
Yeah. So your developer. So I'm inferring from this, your developer lifecycle is you've got people who are working locally on something. Maybe there's some local tests they can run. They're committing. That's running some deploy job that might take some number of minutes into a dev stack that is entirely theirs within your development accounts, and then your tests are running and you're sort of proving whether or not that worked okay. Is there scope for speeding that up? Is serverless and the deployment process there kind of the bottleneck, or is something else the thing that would be in the way of that?
No, that's as you say, that deployment is about it's about 9 or 10 minutes now. Actually, we're crossing from Webpack to ES Build recently. That took it down to basically halved it, because the Webpack is quite slow compared to ES Build. They've got better tree shaking and bits and pieces in ES Build. So yeah, single-digit minutes is completely acceptable for our deployment. We don't find it to be a bottleneck. We do have integration tests, etc., that run on PRs when we ship those. So there is some wait time involved in getting those tests to run and pass. But at the moment, yeah, it's still. I do a lot of specification work rather than development work, and myself and a product manager still struggle to keep up with 3 developers to specify the work as quickly as they can get through it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And the integration tests, are they running sort of? You're not deploying the integration tests into Lambdas, or you are running them into Lambdas and then you're end-to-end testing the stuff in the dev pipeline?
Yes, we are. So those integration tests are basically hitting APIs and Appsync endpoints.
Gotcha. Another question from the chat before we wrap up. Debauer 2001 says, did you consider SAM to run serverless locally for developers?
I see people doing this online sometimes. We didn't actually try out using SAM for much of anything. I think you can easily find online there are some drawbacks to SAM. I think it tries to, I think basically cloning or mocking AWS services in running things locally is just not really worth it in the final analysis. If you are in a situation to allow developers to provision their own stacks, it's easiest, I think, just to get the local unit test running locally, but otherwise deploy your stack and actually test against real cloud infrastructure is the quickest way to get it done.
Yeah, good. That I think we're seeing that in the field, the work that we do. That's the most common thing, I think, which is interesting for me because I grew up in a time where you desperately wanted to run everything on your Vagrant box or your laptop or whatever, so that you didn't have all these dependencies. But I think the serverless story seems to be that you kind of can't really do that in any meaningful sense, and actually everything is quick enough and abundant enough that you sort of don't really need to worry about local mocking of stuff. So that was a hurdle for me to get over mentally because of my background, which it spans the same kind of length of your career. I noticed you mentioned SOAP, and I suddenly had horrifying flashbacks to API calls that returned like 200 OK statuses, but actually had an error in the body and all sorts of other kind of horrifying mess. I don't miss that at all. Harking back to
ironically Appsync does as well, so things change as much as they stay the same, or whatever they say.
Typical, yeah, standard. So harking back to my earlier rundown of what's changed in the AWS ecosystem in the last couple of months, are you benefiting from the ability to share test environments between developers, or sorry, test events between developers with Lambda? Is that something that you've been able to use?
I did see that announcement. Unfortunately not. It did strike me as a bit of a UI thing, and we spent some time in the UI, but in the AWS console. So I think if that is already your workflow, you probably benefit from that. But that wasn't one that we jumped for joy with, no.
Fair enough. And the ability to configure 10 gigs of ephemeral storage for Lambda functions. Were you topping out your storage requirements for Lambda?
No, we're pretty lightweight. We do most of our storage stuff in S3, as I guess many people do. So yeah, that sounded quite situational for that extension of Lambda. But I'm looking forward to having that use case at some point in the future, but not yet. No.
Yeah, I think that's sort of data science and those kind of things, which I guess you're not doing a huge amount of in the main part of your product. But great, thanks for sharing today, Mark, and thanks for answering the questions that come up. No doubt we will cross paths again soon, but wish you all the best success for the future of Vtail.
Awesome. Thanks very much, John.
Thanks very much. That was Mark, who I'm just hanging up on in Skype there. You can log off now, Mark. You're done. Thanks for interacting and asking your questions. It's great to get audience questions rather than me asking everything, which is the usual way if nothing else comes out. So we will be announcing the winners of the raffle. I've decided to move that right to the end so that you all have to sit through me thanking everyone instead of going, oh, he's done now, log off. So if you want to find out who's won the raffle, you need to stick around. That's me doing some teasing of future stuff. Learning presentation is one of my things at the moment. So we thank our sponsors this evening. Deloitte, Esynergy, and Sainsburys Tech. You obviously saw their VT earlier and what they're about. They're mostly touting for business and also hiring. I should mention, of course, that the Scale Factory is hiring. We'll be hiring mid-level and junior AWS folk in the next 12 months. So if you are earlier on in your career, as our friends from CloudReach earlier were, then you definitely drop me a line and we'll tell you all about those and keep in touch. We also thank this evening Paul and Nat and Jonas and Yo-Yu and Ijaz, who are all sort of behind the scenes involved in putting this event together. Wrangling sponsors and speakers and so forth. So although I'm the beardy face of the event, there are plenty of other people working really hard behind the scenes. I just throw some video together and then just talk at you for a couple of hours, which is nice and easy for me as far as I'm concerned. I know that you're a bunch of nerds as well, and I figured you'd be interested in seeing what it actually looks like behind the scenes. I'm also kind of proud of this setup because it's taken me a lot of finessing, and this was my lockdown project when when the world was existential angst coming out of the ears, I was basically shopping for video components and screens and stuff. And it's, this is what it takes to put the user group together, and it's a lot of fun. We will be meeting again on the 20th of July. At the present time, we are not 100% sure whether that is going to be an online or an in-person event. Do watch this space. Well, not this space, because we won't be broadcasting here until at least the 20th of July. But you can keep an eye on our socials and on LinkedIn, and of course on the meetup page itself. We'll let you know what those plans are. Do fill out our attendee survey. Let us know how the event was for you. You can use the QR code, or you can use the link that Paul has pasted diligently into the Twitch chat. Let us know how tonight was. Tell us how we can improve things. And the moment you've all been waiting for, of course, is the raffle winners. The first prize this evening goes to Sanjaya Guntalaki, who wins an Amazon Echo. Second prize goes to Scott Seddon, and third prize goes to Mohammed Omar, who both win Echo Dots. Don't forget that we can only ship those to UK addresses, so hopefully all three of you are either in the UK or able to accept a delivery to the UK. Paul will get in touch tomorrow to, or somebody, Paul, somebody else, someone who isn't me, essentially, is going to get in touch with you tomorrow and arrange for delivery details. So with that, thank you very much for joining this evening. It's been great to host for you as ever, and stay well, be safe, be lucky. We'll see you at least on the 20th of July, if not before. Please do join the Discord in the meantime and say hello there. I've been John Topper, and I wish you all the best.